Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today I am chatting with Megan Reed. She is the Director of Business Development at Baked by Melissa. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Natalie. Thanks so much for asking me to be on. I'm super flattered.
Very excited to dive into your journey and the relationship and similarities between marketing, business development, partnerships, all of that good stuff we're going to touch on in today's episode. But before we jump into all of that, Megan, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. So I was born in California, right outside of LA, and grew up in Bakersfield, California, and came to New York when I was 10 years old and just like loved the city. Went with my grandma. She brought me on like a birthday trip. So since then, I sort of like had my sights set on New York and getting there. And so when I had the opportunity with college, I set my sights on the East Coast and did a college visit out to Fordham University in the Bronx and got in there. Yeah, and the rest is history. I've been in the New York City area for the last 14 years and studied business development, or sorry, not business development, business administration with a concentration in marketing and management at Fordham. And yeah, I mean, I think initially I wanted to go to Fordham for English. Like I love reading and writing and always have. But as I sort of thought about my future and sort of living in New York, business felt like the right path. And it was definitely something I was interested in, and loved my time at Fordham. And like they have a really great entrepreneurship program. So that got me really excited about entrepreneurship and business. And so, yeah, that's why I pursued that path.
That's so you went at 10 years old, and at 10 years old, you already could see the magic of New York. I feel like that's something people realize when they're older.
Yeah, I don't know. We had like the college trip. We did like the rowboats in Central Park, and
Oh,
yeah, it was just great. And I mean, Bakersfield's not a small town, but it's definitely smallish. Like I wanted to get out and sort of set my sights
yeah.
for bigger. Yeah.
My family's from Huntington Beach.
Okay.
So I would go to soccer tournaments in Bakersfield. So, but I do know I did have friends and stuff that had lived there and then that wanted to like move out and go to like a bigger city. But that's a big change going across the country.
Yeah, it definitely was. I knew no one. It's also just a great learning experience of like how to build community and make new friends in a city. And so yeah.
Yeah, I always talk about it on the podcast, but I moved to Austin not knowing anybody, and it was such a great experience. And it's always fun to, you kind of get to like reinvent yourself whenever you move somewhere completely new. And so, yes, always highly recommend moving to a new city. I feel like, especially when you're young and you have the chance, take the risk because you can always move back home. That's always going to be an option.
Yeah. Don't you feel like, especially as it pertains to career, like such a confidence booster?
Yeah.
Like I know it's such a cheesy thing. Like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. I think that's really like true to if you can make it in a new city, whether it's New York or Austin or LA or wherever it is, like it just gives you confidence in your decision making and sort of like your ability to adapt and adjust to a new environment, whether it's a new job or a new career or a new city. Like I just think doing that has given me so much confidence going into my career.
Yeah, that's such a good way to put it because you have to build everything from scratch and you have to figure everything out all by yourself. And so it absolutely, I think, gave me so much more confidence. And yeah, because you all have to like make your friend group from scratch and like build everything. And so it's definitely hard, but it teaches you so many amazing skills.
Yeah, definitely.
So, talk to me a little bit about business development in general. I feel like it's kind of I know it's a very broad term, but if you can help us understand what is business development and like what type of person is this a good career path for?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask this question. I was like, it is sort of a hard question to answer. It really does depend on the organization and their needs and sort of how they think about business development as a role. For my career personally, like I started out in really more of a sales position, like sort of your traditional sales position. I was selling financial data publications to big organizations. I knew nothing about said financial data publication, a 22-year-old. But I loved talking to people. I loved sort of like understanding what their needs were and that whole part of sales. And I do feel like in terms of the sort of profile or, if you're thinking about your career, there's like this big misconception in sales that you have to be a certain way or you need to be really aggressive. Maybe that's, been true in the past. I don't think in today's world, like that's what makes a successful salesperson is someone who's like a shark or going to be like pestering you or smooth talking. I think it's really someone who can listen, understand people, understand what their needs are, um, apply critical thinking and just like structure a deal that makes sense for both sides. Like, especially as I've gotten more into partnerships in my career. But yeah, I think just depending on the role in the business, business development for me has been, it can look more like a traditional sales role, or it can be more encompassing, like in my current position, where it includes brand partnerships. I work really closely with marketing, um, and I oversee our wholesale business. So it can be a lot more holistic. And internally, actually, at Baked by Melissa, they really refer to my position as director of new business, which I think is sort of how people a lot of organizations think about business development is it's a person or a team that's exploring new frontiers or new opportunities to grow the business. And there's not always a role where that sort of fits into, especially within a marketing organization where you're pursuing, like potentially an entirely different product line or a new wholesale partner or point of distribution for your product. So I think just depending on, the organization and their needs, it can mean different things. But for me in my current role, it does tie a lot more closely to brand and marketing. And I'm just constantly thinking about how we grow Baked by Melissa and get it in front of more people.
I like that director of new business. Actually, as Sky Society, coincidentally, I don't know why I didn't realize this before we started interviewing, but we're hiring right now for business development. And that's exactly what this person would be doing is exploring new ways of growing Sky Society and just like trying all new initiatives. So, and I think you're absolutely right that the role does totally vary depending on where you're at. But I want to dive in a little bit deeper to how you started in sales because I think that is really scary for a lot of people. A sales role, like you said, it sounds like, is it really cutthroat? Is it really scary? But can you share a little bit about lessons you learned from that role, how it helped you grow? Because I also started at a sales job, or my role was BD, but sales focused at the beginning. And I would call my dad every day and say I wanted to quit because it was so hard. But it gave me a lot of confidence. I grew a lot. So I'd love to hear your experience.
Yeah, and I will give it to you straight, like because part of obviously like moving from California to New York is like I didn't have, I have like wonderful supportive parents, but I didn't have this like safety net. A lot of my friends from college moved back home because they had family in the tri-state and could still work, in the city and live at home and not pay the exorbitant rent costs. Like I didn't have that. My options were like get a job where I can support myself right out of college and stay in New York or move back home. So I was always really thoughtful, proactive, and like I just didn't have the luxury of sort of moving slowly or just figuring it out. Like I had 3 jobs in college. Like I built that safety net where I could, like while I was in school. And then coming out of school, I did a ton of interviewing and was just like really on top of that career search. And I got an offer at a media company, I think to be like a media planner or something. And that sounded very like sexy and cool in New York. And um, I want to say the salary was 30 or 35,000.
I've heard that. I've heard that before for agencies in New York. Yes.
Yes, and it like all sounds so fun and glamorous, but the reality of living on that salary in New York City is like, not glamorous. So I remember calling my mom and saying, I think I can do it. And we sort of ran the numbers and figured it out. Separately, I had been working with a recruiter who got me an interview at this financial data publication company, and it was a sales position, not something I thought I wanted to do, um, but like I nailed the interview and they loved me. And I was the youngest salesperson they had ever hired. I was 22 and again, knew nothing about finance. But the salary was, I think, 60K plus commission.
Like
And
double what the other offer was.
trouble, and I needed to pay my rent. And so it was like really as simple as that. But to your point, I think what you were getting at is like you get in the role, there's cold calling, there's emailing, there's talking to, I was talking to sometimes like a hedge fund manager. Again, like people I had no experience speaking to. So I think it's just such a great crash course of like how to handle yourself in those situations, how to speak to different people in different industries, and also, like how to market in a real grassroots way, like really understand what the product is and how you sell it. So I really think for me, it's built a great foundation as I've moved into more business development or marketing roles, because it helps to have some understanding of what the people who are actually going to be on the front line selling your product face every day,
Mhm.
so that you can be a more effective partner to your sales force or to your organization as a whole.
I think that's a good interpretation or like experience I think that a lot of people have, especially when starting in sales. And that is oftentimes a consideration for a lot of people is the financials. So yeah, while the like media jobs sound super cool, if you don't have, you can't live at home or you don't have family that's supporting you or helping you out financially, that isn't always an option to take. And so thank you for sharing that. That was like your experience. So you started here within BD, that was kind of your introduction, and then you went to ClassPass next, is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, and that really was like such a cool opportunity for me because it was a sales position, but it was at like a company that for me was like the epitome of like cool and what I loved. The story there was I actually hadn't been in that first sales role for very long, and I was doing well. I was exceeding targets. The people there were great. Um, for all intents and purposes, it was a great first job. But I was an early ClassPass user, and ClassPass is a fitness app. In the early days, you used to be able to pay $99 a month and get like unlimited access to
Oh my
boutique.
gosh.
Those were the days. Those were the days. It's crazy now to think
I
that.
went in New York, I tried to use ClassPass. I go to Solid Core and I live in Austin. A Solid Core class in Austin is like, I don't know, 13 credits. And I went to New York and it was like 18, 19 credits. I was
Oh,
like, what's
yeah.
going on?
Yeah. It's gotten so crazy. And I mean, obviously back then it was like the height of sort of like VC funding growth. So it was not sustainable by any means, but it was a wonderful time to be a fitness fan. And so they actually emailed their subscribers about about the job opening, which I thought was funny. I don't think people do that anymore.
I was like,
So
I just did that yesterday, but
well, it definitely makes sense in the context of your business.
yes.
Very,
Or for smaller businesses, I feel like it makes sense.
yeah.
But your community is more niche and yeah.
Yeah, they definitely had like super fans in a niche community. And so I applied, and I think for me it was like it was super enticing. I mentioned at the beginning, I took this entrepreneurship class in college and really like loved that and really admire like business owners, big and small. Like I actually think I don't know. I like I'll say this sounds really bad, but I get more upset when like a small business closes on my block than like anything else. Like I just think it's
Aw.
so impressive, and I like admire so much when people, even like what you're doing, you're passionate about this and you've like taken a leap to, so that's when you reached out. I was very like, wow, that's amazing that she's building this community and she's so passionate about marketing. And so anyone who's like pursuing their passion like that, I just really admire. So anyway, I'll just say I just like jumped at the opportunity to be a part of a startup. It's what I had wanted to do coming out of college and just really didn't know how. I think also at that time, there was this notion that to get into startups, you had to be in San Francisco or in Silicon Valley, like this Silicon Alley in New York City. It was like a newer thing. It was around that time when like Rent the Runway and ClassPass and sort of all those companies were coming up. So I joined that sales force. They hired around 20 or 30 salespeople, and it was So yeah, it was big. And it was, I think at that time there were maybe 20 employees total at ClassPass.
Oh wow.
Um, hired that team and it was really to expand markets. So we were basically just a launch team. We would go to different cities. We would physically go to, I launched Austin, Dallas, Houston, Kansas City, so many different cities. And we would like physically go take the owner's classes. And it was our responsibility to like sign on the supply side, which in that business is the fitness studio.
So you'd
Um,
go to Austin, you'd sign up for a bunch of workout classes, go to the class and at the end try to pitch them, or
yes, Natalie, when I tell you 1 week I did 20 boutique fitness classes in 5 days.
were you in the best shape of your life?
I don't know. I don't at some point it's diminishing returns, I think. It was all different types of classes, so I'm sure it wasn't great, but it was so much fun and just to be at that early point in my career where I had that kind of energy to be
Because you're traveling on top of that, so that's already
traveling. No,
draining.
exactly. Staying in hotels or Airbnb.
Oh,
We had some crazy Airbnb experiences. But yeah, it was talk about a crash course of just like being at an early stage startup, being in sales. Um, like I built such a camaraderie with my coworkers, obviously, just like being in that environment. And I think around a year, 10 months to a year into that role, I got the opportunity to go to London to launch that market. It was our first international launch. And it's just funny to think about it now. Like obviously this would never fly, but they sent me there with a laptop and
to
that was
London?
like no work visa, no like just to London. And it was supposed to be a 3-month assignment. I ended up living there for 6 months in a studio.
What? Did they pay for your housing?
Yes, which was amazing. Yeah,
That's amazing. How was that?
it was awesome. And I will just say, like, there were a lot of those like opportunities at that company at that time. And I think at a lot of startups during that period of time where, again, it was just sort of growth at all costs. That was like the strategy. It was like, let's get market share and I mean, they're doing amazing. I just caught up with
Yes.
who's still there. Like they got acquired by MindBody. Um, and yeah, so I lived there. I didn't have a work visa, like just sort of like building that business. And I was the only ClassPass employee in the market.
So you went by yourself.
Yeah, and I think I was 24 or 3 or
Oh
something.
my gosh. What a like scary thing, but also so cool to like
Yeah.
do a couple years in London.
Yeah, and I mean it was not, and I had studied abroad there as well. And so I was familiar. And I think it was scary, definitely. And it was not glamorous. Like it was really, really hard. And I was working all the time because, you're filling that sales role, the account management role. I was doing grassroots marketing. We were doing launch events. But like such a great crash course. And I think if I was talking to someone younger, like put yourself up for those opportunities and go for them. Like, even if they're scary, because that has set me up, like that single experience has set me up to feel confident going into any new position, any new challenge or opportunity. And just like, I can do this. I was 23 living in London. Like, I did great. Like, it was a very successful launch. Like, I almost think sometimes now that I'm in my 30s and a little bit later in my career, I second guess myself more now than I did when I had much less experience. And I think with wisdom comes more wisdom of the fact that like you don't know as much as you think you do.
Yeah.
Uh, but like take advantage of the energy.
Naivety.
Yeah, exactly. And go for it. And
Yeah.
I hounded my boss and the leadership to go to London. I was like, I raised my hand. I made it very clear, like, I can do this. I raise my hand, send me there. So just ask for what you want.
I'm still like, I can't imagine working at a startup and being like, hey, we need someone to go live in London for a couple of months. Like, who wants to go? And you're like, me.
Yeah, I mean, I will say, like, it didn't fall, it didn't totally fall into my lap. Like, I also was a really strong performer on the team. I had exceeded sales targets and, worked really hard because there were opportunities like that, and it was a great company to work for. I'm obviously motivated to sell as much as I can and hit my targets and earn that commission. But yeah, just putting yourself in a position where you are excelling in your role so that when cool opportunities like that come up, you can raise your hand and they'll feel confident sending you.
Do you so kind of listening to your story so far, I can see that you are a high performer in a sales role. Do you have any advice or tips for selling or just like being better in a role like that or hitting your quota or exceeding your quota?
Gosh, I don't want to sound like Wolf of Wall Street at all. Like it's, but I really think in any role, sales or not, like there's no replacement for hard work. And I think anytime my sales are a little bit down, it's always just like, well, I haven't been putting out as much, like there's no replacement for doing that outreach, spending the time. I also think something that I have learned over time is like some of my past roles were very much like sign it, move on, sign it, move on, sign it, move on, like bring them on board. And I was less like focused on the relationship and the importance of cultivating that relationship. And so now I'm really such a stickler for it. Like in my current position, we have a brand partner that we've worked with, or I've worked with in the capacity of my role for the last 3 years. And they've come on year after year at a higher spend. They do sponsored content with us. They're a brand partner, and we've sort of increased that business with them year over year. And I think in part because I've really cultivated that relationship, and I don't think you can really consider your sale done until you've provided them the recap deck and had a conversation of, what was your experience? What could we have done better? I just think it's so easy to like sign on the dotted line, like pass it to your account manager or the team that's executing. And that's that. Um, and I think some sales positions are set up to almost incentivize that, but it's so important to make sure you are leaving that relationship like as best as you can and closing the loop fully.
And how about for younger women that are getting into BD and getting into sales? Is there anything that you look for when you're hiring for your teams or anything that you kind of look for in more greener applicants that are starting the industry that you kind of like, or qualities you maybe see that you're like, oh, they're going to do really great, or what you maybe look for in an interview?
Yeah, I mean, I think in sales, maybe this just because it's what I know best, but I think in sales sometimes more than at other positions, like if you have the right qualities, it really doesn't matter as much like that you have that exact experience. Like if you are tenacious and you're confident, you can present yourself well, and you also like are an active listener and ask really good questions. Like to me, those are things that indicate that you'll be successful as a salesperson. Like I also just think like do you follow up, after the interview? Because that's a good sign. I also think, like if you're not trying to negotiate your salary at all, like, and we're hiring you for a sales position,
Mhm.
that's a concern. Like to me, that's a
That's
little,
actually a really good point.
yeah,
Yes.
like if you're not positioning yourself and
Ah.
like to me it's a little bit of a red flag. I think I also don't believe in like negotiating just for the sake of negotiating. Like if you get an offer and it feels fair and appropriate, like you shouldn't negotiate just for the sake of it, but ask the questions and make sure you're being valued at the level that you deserve in your offer. And that could mean asking questions about the PTO policy or your benefits. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to, ask for more money, but I do think like um the way someone sells themselves and looks out for themselves is an indication of how they will also look out for your business.
Yeah, I think that's a great little tip there. And I think that's like showing up in every interview with the right questions um and yeah, more than just at the very end, maybe asking for more money or even just being vocal at the beginning if they ask what your salary expectations are, of giving an actual number and not, dancing around the question of showing that you are direct and comfortable speaking about that stuff.
Yeah, and I think with that too, like you'll get more confident if you've done your research and you feel like this is what I earned because of I deserve to earn because of XYZ, and you sort of
Mhm.
have that those legitimate reasons versus just being like, I want more. You'll just feel more confident going into the conversation as well.
Mhm. Okay, so you stayed at ClassPass for a while, and then you kind of went to a couple different roles after this, and your title started to increase. So instead of being on like in the ground doing fitness classes and selling in store
Yeah.
clients, I'm imagining your role like really evolved as you started to move up within BD, get more director level roles, manager roles, partnership roles. So can you speak to kind of this next stage in your career where your, small one-on-one sales went more into like larger partnerships?
Yeah. And I think can also just speak more broadly to that sort of jump and evolution. It's funny because I think there will be a period of time where you're sort of like you've moved to that sort of director level or sort of mid senior level position where you're like not quite ready. And then there's a period of time where you're probably very experienced and like more than ready. And obviously that feels great to feel like really confident and prepared in your role. I think like just a learning sort of leaving ClassPass was there were some opportunities where I was like recruited heavily, and that feels good, right? Like to have someone actively pursuing you and throwing out great titles and great pay. It was a really big jump from one role to the next at that point in my career. And I just think if I could go back, I would evaluate it from all sides. Like I don't think always like title and pay is necessarily like they're big factors, but they shouldn't be the only factors. And I made some like mistakes in moves that I made at that point. Just and I think it was driven by ego. Like the opportunity to be in a director position and earn six figures, so early on was like very enticing. Um, but I think, like moving into that role, it was uncomfortable. I probably didn't have the experience under my belt of like managing folks and being more in charge of the sales strategy, the account management strategy. And so I think probably just knowing when you're getting good experience and when you're ready for that next step. Um, but yeah, I think now I feel very like I've earned my stripes. I feel super confident in my role. I'm confident in myself as a leader and my ability to handle like really big partnerships. I think the biggest shift for me has been getting out of sales where it's sort of like the same pitch, the same sell time and time again. Now, like we talked about earlier, it's an evolution where I'm responsible for exploring many different ways in which we grow the brand, grow the business. So that can look like, you know, negotiating a cookbook deal. That can look like signing a new wholesale partner. That can look like signing a, six-figure brand deal. And I have always liked that variety. Even when I was in more of those traditional sales roles. When I was at ClassPass, I pitched them on a new position, which was a senior manager of business development or something like that. And essentially what it was like taking responsibility for our studio network, our partner network. And so we created like a partner portal where I negotiated like savings for different businesses that they use in their studios. So it was sort of like um, a discount network for fitness studio owners. I also was responsible for planning a bunch of different in-person events in various cities across the country for fitness studio owners. And then I brought on brand sponsors to fund those events. So it was, Square, the credit card reading company, they were a sponsor, Gatorade at some point. So and building that program from scratch to me was like amazing. Like I think going from a sales position where it's here's the product, sell it, sign on the dotted line, to here's white space, build a program, and bring in revenue for the business. And like, so just sort of like that building from scratch. That is where I really thrive, and like sort of creating new channels of revenue and growth for a business that didn't exist prior.
When you're describing those activities, that also sounds so exciting. And also so exciting, I think, when you're early in your career and you're getting to take on that initiative. I'm the question, well, a lot of questions in my head, but one that is coming up is at what point? Because we know the early sales is a grind, right? The early, like you, I feel like you are the epitome of the grind of taking all the fitness classes and selling. And that might look different in different roles for different people. But how long or at what point do you then get to break into that more instead of sales, more like BD, more strategy, more having different responsibilities versus just doing like cold calls and sales? And for someone who's like in that early, I'm doing the sales every day, but like when can I break out of that? Do you have any like timeline or advice there?
I mean, for me, my experience, like I was at startups and I felt like there were opportunities again to like raise my hand and be like, I think we can do this. Or, I think in the director positions that I held after ClassPass, um, I could have successfully done those roles by just continuing to sell the same thing and growing my book of business. But, like I'm always kind of looking at like, what are some other sales channels or partners or businesses that we can work with to grow, that maybe we're not thinking about today, and putting like a business plan together. So putting sort of like a go-to-market plan. I also think if you are in more of a junior sales position and you have some ideas um, on sort of like maybe different industries or sectors that you feel like you should be pitching, that you're not, or different approaches, like if you are within an organization where you think people are receptive to that, I think putting some thought together, and I've put together, like decks to pitch my boss on different things, my bosses over the years on different things or different avenues to explore. Like I think that can help you stand apart as someone who is thinking more strategically and can be a partner to your boss or to leadership in your organization on how you grow the business outside of the existing sort of like processes or channels that you have in place.
I love that. So taking initiative to say, like, I'm going to choose a direction of my role versus waiting for them to tell you, like, what's next. I think that's awesome. I think that's also very rare to find someone that does that. So I love seeing that, like, drive in you and initiative in you early on in your career. So we kind of talked about this next phase broadly, but that brings us to Baked by Melissa. So can you tell me a little bit about your role there?
Yeah, I mean, I came in knowing I wanted to move into a position again where I had autonomy. I could build, in white space. Like, um, there was a lot of exciting, stuff happening with the brand, and still is like a lot of exciting, great stuff. Melissa is our co-founder and CEO, and she's also a really prominent public figure. She's got a huge social following on TikTok and Instagram, and they were getting just like a lot of new opportunities to the business and brand, to grow, whether that was through licensing or book deals or brand partnerships, collaborations. And again, like there wasn't like a position where it really made sense for that to fall, to sort of like explore those growth opportunities. And I think at a lot of, small businesses, like there's not sort of one place that falls, or sort of that expertise. So I came in, I think just I am a generalist. Like I think across the board, like I always have been, like just interested in a lot of different areas, and like even in school, always a very solid student, not like amazing at any one subject, but like sort of liked school generally and did pretty well in most subjects. And I think like that, I know that about myself. Like, and I've found that time and time again in my jobs. I think where I wasn't happy in past positions was where it felt really repetitive. I could kind of like, I knew how to sell people on something and what to say and what to do, and would just do that over and over. So when I came into the sort of interview process here, I knew I was looking for something where I could be challenged every day, take on different types of partnerships and deal structures and learn um, about, like licensing and brand partnerships in a way that I hadn't before. And I think what I love most is like I get to work with really awesome partners and brands and understand what's their strategy, how can we play a part in that, how do we make it make sense for both of us. We're not like a huge brand with like a massive budget where we can work with any partner in the world. So we have to find the ones where it really makes sense and we can mutually benefit from the partnership.
Is there a favorite partnership that you worked on since you've been at Baked by Melissa?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I mean, let's see. Personal victory. Melissa's a really big fan of OXO, the kitchen tools. Um,
I don't know
it's,
if I'm familiar, but I don't spend too much time cooking.
I feel like you would know them. It's sort of just like they have so many like household products of like a
Okay.
lemon juicer, zester, whatever,
I
peeler.
probably own I probably own a product from them. I just don't.
Yeah, totally. No, they're definitely one of those. And yeah, it was just sort of one that we identified um, as, sort of a dream brand or one that made a ton of sense. And um, I just kept going for it, like reaching out on LinkedIn, trying to get an in. And she ended up being, they have like an annual brand ambassador program um, where, they bring on talent, often chefs or kitchen food personalities. And she was one of the two brand ambassadors for them last year. And that was
That's
just awesome.
amazing.
Did great content with them, and we ended up doing her cookbook launch event at their beautiful office in Manhattan, and they were a great partner. And I just think like I've been really fortunate in my career to work with really smart people and also to just partner with smart people. I learn from our partners all the time and just like how they approach doing business and how they approach partnerships.
So is this in office or are you remote here?
It's hybrid, so we have an office in the city that I go into a couple days a week.
I was gonna ask if I were to imagine like the office at Baked by Melissa, like do you guys constantly just have snacks and food around or is there anything favorite that you love eating?
Well, I love our mint chocolate cupcake or mint cookie cupcake. It's a little bit, I feel like people don't always love mint and chocolate together. I love it.
Same, that's
Uh,
my favorite ice cream, mint chocolate chip.
I had it last night, but
Oh.
yeah. But yeah, I take that one out of the pack. Yeah, and our office is great. It's like amazing snacks. It's super bright and colorful. It's a really fun brand to work for.
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like work because like I mentioned, I was just in New York, so I haven't been to one of the like Baked by Melissa locations in New York, but I always see her on my like TikTok page, like always baking something delicious and inspiring me on different recipes. But I always am curious about how different like company products like influence what the work life is there or like how much it is. But I always feel like it'd be fun to work at a company that would give you sweet treats all the time.
Yeah, and just like we love to eat, it's like
Yes.
her passion for cooking and food is really contagious. So it's the cupcakes, it's the salads, it's all of it. She's like I think such a hard worker, sort of like going back to that part, like even at that level, like she is working so hard and she is doing those, the content that you see on top of being our CEO. So it's awesome. Like I said, like working in small businesses or startups where you see that passion like so close up, I think is like super motivating for me as an employee.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see that thread for you throughout your career of working at the different startups. And it's a question I feel like, I mean, there's sides to both working at like a much larger company to working at a startup, but I love your experience and perspective working at the smaller brands and being the generalist. And I think that's super inspiring to hear.
Yeah,
So,
there's definitely been times where I'm like, what would a bigger company be like? And I just don't know. I don't know. I can't speak about that experience. I'm sure it'd be wonderful in different ways. But anytime I like think about it seriously, I'm just like, I don't know if I just am so used to being like up close and personal to the leadership and like seeing sort of like it being built. So just not sure. I'm sure it's great.
yeah, always good merits to both sides. Like the other one that, or like debates, not debate, but just like different perspectives is like agency versus in-house. And
Yeah,
so it's always interesting, I think, where people kind of find their niche in their home. And sometimes it's honestly just by coincidence of just like where your career path takes you. And sometimes it's by like more of a intention of like, I want to work at this company and I'm gonna do anything I can to get there.
totally.
So taking a step kind of away from any specific position, but since you are in partnerships, I'm curious. I feel like now, or at least with Sky Society, like we always love sharing marketing news, and my favorite type of marketing news are partnerships. I think they're just so fun to talk about. I love when two brands come together and make something super creative, super special. So, are there any partnerships that you've seen lately that you've just been obsessed with?
Oh my gosh. Generally, okay, this is like my friends are gonna laugh. You're gonna like send me down a tangent. I'm obsessed with the whole campaign around Charlie XCX because I think like this whole brat, I know we're sort of past it. This whole brat thing, like people I just will talk about it with anyone who will talk about it with me. But and it has less even to do with like her music or her as an artist. I think the whole campaign was genius because it was so accessible and so many different brands could play with it, and that was intentional. And the way that like I think Charlie's team, whomever, was like smart about the fact that it didn't feel like it was rammed down your throat. Like it wasn't like a million different brat collabs. Like it was intentionally democratized a bit so that like everyone could play with that, the font or the color. So I thought that was really genius. And it was sort of like the anti-capitalism collab like vehicle. So I think that's super cool. I also have been really into Airbnb has this new product. I only know it from an outsider perspective, but it's called Airbnb Icons, I think. And they've done like that life-size Polly Pocket house.
Oh, like the Barbie house, is that?
Yeah, they did Ken's
Oh,
house or whatever. They did a partnership with Houseplant, which is Seth Rogen's like pottery cannabis business, and you could stay in his house and like make pottery with him. And I just think like what a fun experiential way to like engage and interact with these brands. And I think what's cool about it is like the stay at the Polly Pocket life size house was maybe $50. Like they're not
what?
yeah, like there were very limited spots, but it was really meant to be a stunt and also a way for like huge brand fans to be able to interact. That wasn't like a money grab with the consumer.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think being able to interact with like the physical world with these brands through like a life-size Polly Pocket house is like it's just genius and so fun.
I'm curious. So I remember seeing those two, like more like Airbnb does, like a house with, and I remember seeing some of those. But I'm curious because I never saw, like I would see Airbnb talk about, or people talk about that Airbnb is doing that, but I would never see, maybe you have, from the perspective of someone staying there, like their experience at the Polly Pocket House. Have you seen that? Am I just missing it?
It was so funny. I was just looking before this. I was at the reviews, like, because I was like, did anyone actually ever stay there? Or was this just fully a PR stunt? Um, I don't know, because you would think if they are trying to democratize it and allow it to be like an experience for a true brand fan, like that's one angle, or you like, fill it with influencers and have them
I was
post
gonna
about.
say, yeah, why wouldn't they invite, yeah, like Alex Earl to come stay at the Barbie house? Like that'd be a huge moment.
Right, and that would get so much like earned
Yeah.
impressions for Barbie. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a combination of both, and a lot of these partnerships are, and I do think you can sort of miss the boat if you focus solely on the influencer and not make sure to think about your consumer and do something like special for your super fans. I think a good partnership has a balance of both.
Yeah. But even still, I was like, let's say that I don't know, my little sister gets invited to the Polly Pocket house and she's like a Polly Pocket super fan or something. I feel like I would still make a TikTok video of like, my sister, like we got to stay at the Polly Pocket house, like this is what it's like whatever. I feel like people would want to share that on social, but I haven't looked, so it could totally exist. But
Yeah.
when you say that, I remember because I remember thinking the same thing about um the Barbie one, but like maybe it is just like everyday people and they're just not thinking about sharing it. Or I don't know if there's like they can't share it if there's like an NDA that they have to sign. I have no idea.
I did hear some funny stuff about the Polly Pocket one, which was like none of it was like really functional,
Oh,
like
that's true. Yeah, can you actually use the toilet?
maybe not actually the nicest place to stay, and I'm sure they have to work out some of those kinks, but I do think like, yeah, I just think like a brand like Airbnb sort of getting in on that like partnerships
Mhm.
experiential world is interesting. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
I feel it was just Halloween. I feel like it'd be fun to see like a Liquid Death X Airbnb like Halloween haunted house.
Yeah, or like
That would be a fun
what's
one.
the movie Hocus Pocus that everyone loves, like a Hocus Pocus
Yes.
thing.
Where like
Uh,
everyone can like go and interact and experience it. That'd be cool.
yeah. But yeah, I'm always that friend who's like, I want to know what like the partnership terms were. Like
Yeah.
even I don't know if you watched that movie Air about Michael Jordan and like just
Yes, yes.
feel like I'm fascinated. The fact that he did and continues to like make more money from his shoe deal. Like I think I'm really like a nerd for that sort of stuff. Like how do you structure a partnership in a way where you're like protecting the interest of the person or the business or whatever it is. And I do love the fact in that whether this is factual or not, but in the movie, like his mom really negotiated that.
Yes.
And he wasn't Michael Jordan as we know him now. He was like some up and coming guy.
hmm
Uh, so it is like sort of a reminder as you're thinking about, if you are earlier in your career or you're negotiating your salary, if people around you who love you and you respect them and you trust them, think that you deserve more, you should listen to them.
Yeah,
Like you should, like he wouldn't have had that deal if his mom didn't think he should ask for more. And I think it's just like an important thing to keep in mind.
I love that. Also a great movie if anyone listening has not
Right.
checked it out. I love that movie.
Yes, great movie.
Okay, Megan. Well, any last advice you would like to share with women in marketing?
Um, well, I guess like so something that I do believe strongly throughout my career is like this sort of idea of career karma, like is what I call it. Just like I if you are having success in your role and even if it's a peer, like and you feel like there's a way you can help another person have success, or maybe you found a position that you're excited about and your friend is still looking, like think I get a lot of joy out of like if my friend is looking for a new position and she tells me what she's looking for, I will look just as hard. Like I think, like and when I lost my job during COVID, like I reached out to my whole network and I said, okay, here are the types of companies that I'm looking at. Here's the type of position that I'm looking for. Like and and I sent out an email and I texted a bunch of friends and they were in it, it felt less lonely to go through that process. And I know like job hunting and interviewing can be really lonely and scary. Um, but if you sort of like bring your village along with you and like just are explicit on like what you're looking for and what you're passionate about, like your people will show up for you and anytime anyone in my network, is looking for a new career, like I like to do anything that I can to help. So I just think like putting out good vibes to your peers. And, if you are in a more senior position, anyone that maybe reports to you or is in a different stage of their career, if you can help them in some way, I think it'll just come back for you in the long run.
I love that. And we need more people doing that because if everyone is doing that, then we would help everyone else move forward together. And being a part of the podcast is a huge part of that. So again, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey and sharing your experience. It has been an absolute pleasure getting to hear all of your advice, and your story is just so inspiring. So thank you so much, Megan.
Thanks, Natalie.